Yeah, Dr. Amit.
Yes,
Dr.
sir.
Bharat. Yeah, I think we can ask Regio to join. How do we verify?
Sir, I have already David sir, na sir. Yes, sir. I have already added him a panelist and probably sent a mail. Otherwise, sir, recently I have just invited him in her email ID.
ठीक है. Okay.
I am just waiting that whether if he joined, then I will directly include him in a panelist.
Even we can again resend the email. चलो ठीक है. Thank you.
Good morning, David sir. Can you hear me? I believe, sir, David sir has joined.
Okay, just wait a minute.
Yes.
Okay, sure. Yeah, good afternoon, Dr. Regio. Good morning, according to you. I am Vineet Saula from India.
Hello, pleasure to meet you. Good afternoon. How is everyone?
Yeah, we are fine. How about you at your place?
Oh, all very good here, thank you. I hope everyone is safe and well, all your colleagues and all the attendees during this time.
Yeah, we are taking precautions, but anyway, we are too dense and too large a population. So something is there. Yeah.
Uh,
I hope things are good at your place.
Yeah. Currently, I'm in Brazil, and I'm in Brazil for the near future. And Brazil, like India, has some challenges in terms of this pandemic, I would say. But hopefully we'll be out of it soon, out of this pandemic soon. Or at least if the virus begins to get weaker, the more it mutates. Anyway, let's see.
okay. Good
Yeah,
afternoon,
sure.
Regio sir.
Hi, Vinay.
Dr. Amit from MNIT Jaipur, sir. Dr. Amit Joshi from MNIT Jaipur, sir. Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, David Riccio, sir.
Hello. Hi. Good afternoon.
Sir, I have made you as a presenter. Now you can share whatever you want to share, sir.
Okay. So let me share my screen. Okay. How many attendees do we have online today?
Sir, we have total registered participants for this course is more than 2,200, sir.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
At the same time, sir, actually the whatever the lecture is there, that is to be scheduled to stream online on YouTube. So there will be more than, I think, equal amount of participants over there. So we can expect that more than 3,000, sir.
Wow. So, well, I'm very privileged then to be part of this initiative. And firstly, I'd like to say thank you very much for inviting me. It's I think this is a good capacity building and training program that you've put together, and I think it's very, very important. So thank you very much. If you don't mind, I'll start sharing my screen. Can you see this and can you hear me and see my presentation properly?
Yes, sir. You are audible as
Yes.
well as we can see your first slide, Global Excellence Ranking and Strategy, sir.
Okay, good. Right, so what I'm going to talk about today, I've put a lot of slides together. It may exceed 2 hours, or we may have to stop it short. But basically what I'm going to talk about is...
maybe sir, before starting, I think I request Saula sir to just introduce, sir. Please.
Oh, of course,
David,
I thought you did.
mind,
Sorry,
can we
go ahead.
You? I'm sorry. I just
No,
took
no,
time
no
from
problem.
my setting. Yeah, please. Dear participants, let's welcome Dr. David Riccio. It's our privilege and we are very glad to have him here for our program. He is currently Global Head of Consulting for Quebec Curely Simons. Please correct me, David, if I'm wrong.
No,
He is
that's
an
perfect.
international bridge. Yeah, thank you. International bridge builder, strategy expert with extensive experience of government and development for higher education institution in Middle East, KSA, UAE, Russia, former CIS countries, UK, Asia, Oceania, and Latin America. Through his work, he has also advised advanced research institutes and government agencies around the world on international higher education and strategic development. Very important for all the institutes nowadays, developing frameworks and global engagement strategies. Prior to QS, David worked extensively in Brazil as a senior advisor to scientific councils and universities. He also held senior roles in universities in UK, Latin America, and Southern Korea. He is a member of Royal Institute of International Affairs, Chatham House, a fellow of Royal Institute of Arts and Commerce, FRSA, and a member of Senior Advisory Council for organizations working in the field of space exploration and space research. We are very happy, David, to have you here. Over to you, please.
Okay, thank you. Equally as happy to be participating today. And as I've said, it's an excellent program you've put together and a very important initiative. So, yeah, I'll be talking about global excellence rankings and strategies today. I hope to share with you everything I wanted to. However, there's a lot of material here, and I'm not sure if we'll have the time, but let's have a go. Before talking about rankings, I'd just like to contextualize something. about the building blocks to global competitiveness in terms of India. And I remember 20 years ago reading about the policies that India was putting together. And I found it very, very interesting. Simply because this was a big drive to encourage scientific participation, to encourage advanced capacity building, training. So what I've put here are what I see as a kind of 4 landmarks in terms of the policy for India. And you all know this better than I do, but I think it's very important to contextualize when we talk about rankings and all of these things, to reflect upon policy as well. So as you know, the SPR in 1958 was very, very important. And then we moved on to the Technology Policy Statement in 1983. And we can kind of see this as really building the national foundation for, progressing science, research, and particularly education. So these we can consider, drivers to the national scenario. But when we move to the global international scenario, we had the STP in 2003, and most importantly in 2013, the Science, Technology and Innovation Policy. So for me, at least, before we even talk about rankings or measuring excellence, I think it's very important to remember these important stages within the policy, the scientific policy in India. And we can see it as going from expansion in 1983 to participation, and the STIP in 2013 as really kind of enabling leadership through technology, and obviously through technology and science, and obviously as preparing the ground for the Technology Vision 2035. So I'd like us to kind of also think about this when we're talking about global excellence and rankings, because it's an important context. Okay, let me just move on. Okay, so then let's move on. We've got these great policies that were developed, and these policies in each stage of their history enabled certain progress and certain developments. So how do we measure the effects of policy? Well, of course, we've got national frameworks to measure policy. That's always been there. But I'd like us to think all these other organisations exist to provide us with instruments. Okay? And it's important to remember this idea of instruments, tools. These organisations provide us with tools by which to measure the effectiveness of certain strategies and to gain, possible new insights into how we can develop further. So yes, we've got the rankings agencies, QS, the Shanghai ranking, ARWU, the THE, and you've got US News, and these are kind of the principal rankings agencies. Then we go into different areas of data, which are equally as important. So we've got, as you know, the Global Innovation Index 2019 is a very, very important, I would say, way of measuring how well each country is doing in terms of innovation through many, many different indicators. We've also got Clarivate, and we've also got Reuters, and we've also got Elsevier. And these are more bibliometric trends. These are more research publishing trends and research publishing data. And why I'm putting these on the screen is to kind of remind people that all these are tools that we can use as institutions and as governments, local governments and national governments, in order to get a better understanding of how we can move forward and how we can participate more in certain international scenarios and what we can and need to prioritize. Okay. And as I've mentioned here, all these data points taken together reveal the trends and strengths that constitute the higher education, scientific and innovation profile of a nation. And ultimately, the extent to which universities and that nation participate in various global scenarios. And I'd like us to keep thinking about this, us as institutions, us as universities, how we're participating globally through our science and through doing what we're good at. That's very important. I'd like us to keep that in mind, global participation. So as I've said, these are different tools for measuring policy effect, the effects of policy and development. Another tool is just by looking at the World Bank, and you all know this very well, research and development expenditure in terms of the percentage of GDP, another important data source, because we can kind of see in terms of BRICS, and BRICS is still very relevant, how China has suddenly, increased its expenditure, and that will be reflected in the research it does, in the patents it files, for example. The UK, you can see, has been quite level in terms of his research expenditure, and we can see that India has dropped slightly, but there's been lots of reports on that in India as well. So this is another important tool for kind of ascertaining and understanding the environment in which we need to move in. Another thing is to look at patents as well. I'm just giving you examples of different, before talking about rankings, of different data sources in which to understand the context and to understand our development in order to put different strategies in place. So we can see that the patents in force in India have increased. I mean, 2017, 2018, they're pretty good numbers compared to 2010. Another question is whether this is related to the domestic expenditure on research and development. And it may be, because if you correlate the two, patents in force related to expenditure on research and development, you can see that China, for example, has had a very, very significant increase. China's the red one here, the increase in patents that are actually in force today. Just almost 2.5 million patents in 2018. And we can see the slight struggle Brazil's had. We can see the steady increase in patents with Russia, and also South Africa, another important member of the BRICS economies, it arrived at 73,000, just over 73,000 patents. So again, this is looking at patents, looking at domestic expenditure on research and development. These are tools to be taken in addition to the ones I've mentioned, the Global Innovation Index, for example. Talking about the Global Innovation Index, if we look at that, again, it contextualizes the situation, just as rankings does. These are all ways of contextualizing and understanding the situation. Ranks 52 in the most recent Global Innovation Index release. And it's interesting here, I've just selected a few of the indicators related to education and research. We can see it's 110, India's 110 globally in education. Government funding per student is 72. Tertiary enrollment is 86 globally. Research and development is 35 globally, which is a pretty good position to have when you think of how many countries are included in the Global Innovation Index. But you can see also I've put Malaysia in here because Malaysia is an interesting example of a country that's invested over the past 10 years, substantial amounts in terms of frameworks, in terms of research funding, and this is kind of reflected in its position in the Global Innovation Index at the moment. And it's not surprising also that Russia and China are doing very, very well in these areas, particularly, as we said before, China, it's within the top 20 for its gross expenditure on research and development. Is that reflected in the patents in force? Quite possibly. It's a strong correlation, actually. And then moving on, just a little bit more on this, just to illustrate the situation. University industry research collaboration. This is taken from Scopus, is 23. India's position 23 in the world for this. These are, and again, think back to the policy that has enabled this, the 2013 scientific and technological policy in India. That's very much enabled the country to attain these positions. So these are very, very strong positions globally for innovation, and absolutely a very attractive context through which to internationalize universities. So the environment, as we see it here, is very, very strong. But we may require, as universities ourselves, we may need to understand how we can make use of this context, or what strategies we need to develop to really complement and align ourselves with this innovation context. Another thing, if we look at Elsevier, for example, again, I'm just giving you quick examples here of data sources us as institutions can use. We see that the number of co-authorships and citations and the kind of impact that these collaborations have. So for engineering and technology over the past 5 years, we see that Brazil, you've done about 1.3 K in terms of co-authorships in engineering and technology. That gave you just 19,648 citations, and that results in an impact of 14.6. And it's very, very interesting. You're not publishing a lot with Brazil, but what you've published with Brazil has had a larger impact than the stuff you publish with the United States, for example. So again, this is where data begins to reveal certain strategies and strategic landscapes. As institutions, you may now think, okay, engineering and tech, we didn't realize that India as a whole is doing research with Brazil that has a greater impact than research we're doing with the USA. So as institutions, you may think, what are we doing with Brazil? Can we be doing more with Brazil? The same thing can be said about Spain and South Africa, for example. South Africa is very, it's a bloc neighbour, it's a policy neighbour. So you would think, well, 26,945 citations for just almost 2,000 co-authorships with South Africa. And that gives us quite an attractive, quite an attractive impact, just over 12, well, actually an impact of 13 citations per paper. So, again, these are interesting dimensions and an instrument. It's an instrument for us to understand the context and situation better. Definitely as institutions, we can be looking at all these different data points and bringing them together in terms of the way we develop strategy as a university, because this can be really important for the way we engage globally. And remember, I said at the beginning, it's very important to think about how we're engaging globally. I've just done the same analysis here through Scope Elsevier, life sciences and medicine. You can see it again. And for life sciences and medicine, India as a nation as a whole is doing interesting things with Denmark. The citations far exceed, as you can see here, the co-authored publications, which results in a very, very strong impact value. So again, and also with Russia, again, a bloc partner, a BRICS bloc partner. So as institutions, we might start thinking, if we're working in life sciences and medicine, so what are we doing with Denmark? What are we doing with Mexico? What are we doing with Russia? The ease of doing business with Russia, the fact that we're in the BRICS bloc together, we should be, potentially taking advantage of that. And it's reflected in this bibliometric data. So again, before even talking about rankings, I'm just giving you examples of the different data points you can bring together. Yes, the patents, the Global Innovation Index, the bibliometric information, and also the rankings information, which we're going to look at now. So moving on to, I'm just going to look at the World University rankings this year for the context of India. And again, through this narrative, I'd like you to think about, as institutions, about how you're globally engaged and what you're doing internationally. You don't have to be the leading institution in India to be doing stuff internationally. This concerns institutions of all different ages and all different sizes, because there's an equivalent overseas, and there's always an international interest to know more about what you're doing. I want to say every institution has something very, very important to show. I've visited many institutions across the world, and I can say every institution I visited has something unique to talk about, has something unique to offer. And that's what we need to always keep in mind. And that concerns strategy. It's not just about the data. Data is a consequence of strategy and decisions. Now, another important point I'd like you to mention is that we need to understand rankings for what they are. And I'll spend 2 or 3 minutes just talking about this slide because it's kind of an important message to communicate. I'd like to say that data in these indices and their indicators reflect the effectiveness of strategic decisions and behaviours. Okay, this is where data is a consequence of strategic decisions and behaviours which enable a university to become more integrated in global scenarios. And especially when you look at rankings, these rankings need to be seen as an instrument, as a tool that we can use to develop our strategy, to develop our university organisation, and to become more integrated globally. So I'd like to see rankings indicators used as a proxy or as an instrument for development, sooner than as a proxy for judging a university good or bad. Okay, so to quickly say a little bit more about this, a rankings index is an instrument, as I've said, which measures performance according to set criteria. All indices need further refinement and alignment as the world experiences greater economic, social, and geopolitical change. Second point, indices, rankings indices in this slide, are composed of indicators which can be individually adopted as signposts for strategic planning, but which should not be adopted as a university mandate. So what I'm saying here, it's not to say in 2 years, I want to see you in the top 100 in the world. We kind of have to think, you know, in a different way with regards to rankings indicators. We should be saying, okay, this is for international, this is an internationalization indicator. How can we use this to increase our internationalization? Because surely, absolutely, if universities begin to adopt best practices, okay, for sure that will be reflected in these rankings indices. Okay, third point, we know that universities need to internationalize and engage with partners across continents. Rankings must not drive this, but underline the importance of the task. So it is the work the institutions do which drives success, not rankings results. So again, it's going back to the institution, and for institutions to ask themselves, what do we need to do to be more international? How can we reach out more to maybe Russian institutions that are doing work in a similar area to us? How can we reach out more to Brazilian institutions? We can see the results of South Africa for life sciences and medicine. There's a lot of citations happening there. What more can we begin to do with South Africa? And it's not just about research. It's about educational programs. It's about skills training. So there's lots of different things that can be done. Okay, excuse me. last point on that slide, which is an important point, institutions must develop strategies and confident actions to engage and show the world the valuable work they do. And this is absolutely important. All institutions are different and may serve different communities. Whether rankings is here or not, this work needs to be known and shown. So institutions need to begin to tell their story. And again, let's not be under the illusion that only the top 50 in the world or the top ranked 100 in the world are qualified to talk about what they do and what they're good at. No, this is for all universities at the community level, at the public level, at the national level. There's always something to talk about. There's always something important to show. Let's just say, for example, based on my experience in the past 10 years ago, Institute of Public Health in Bangalore, they do a lot of great work. This is just an example I'm picking out of the Indian context. There's obviously hundreds more, but there's always something to talk about, always important work being done. And we'll think about, well, how can we begin? How can we talk about this, and where do we need to show it? And we can look at that after. So let me just go on to the next slide. Okay, so in terms of QS World University Rankings, there's three kind of dimensions. There's the surveys, which are academic reputation and employer reputation. They amount to 50%. Of the World University Rankings. Then there's the data the university submits to QS through its data allocation platform. That's 30%. And then there's the bibliometric data, which is from Scopus, and that's at 20%, citations per faculty. So interesting here, 50% is survey-based. What does that mean? Well, academic reputation, employer reputation is based on 50% of what people know and think about you in the international market, in the international higher education market. So this is about market perception. You can also think about this, 50% of World University Rankings is about perception. As I've said before, let's break this down in terms of the indicators. So 40% is academic reputation, 10% is employer reputation. That's your 50% there. 20% is a faculty-student ratio. 20% is citations per faculty. And the final 10% of that rankings are what you call international indicators, international faculty ratio and international student ratio. Let's translate this into something more practical. What does this mean? So we've seen these indicators and their weightings. What this means is 40% is a perception of academics. 10% is a perception of industry and employer. That's your 50% survey. 20% is your commitment to teaching. 20% is your commitment to science. And 10% is your commitment to international, or how attractive you are, let's say, for international faculty and international students to want to attend your institution. The other thing I'd like to show you here are how the different indicators correlate with the different rankings ranges. So we can see here that those within the top 100, the indicators that correlate the strongest are academic reputation and employer reputation. And these indicators begin to take on a different influence as you move across the rankings range. So for example, if we go between 400 and 500, we can see that the influence of academic reputation begins to drop off slightly, and we see that the faculty student indicator becomes more of a prominent factor, along with international faculty and international students. And this kind of these indicators kind of keep their influence right up until around 950. So this is just something interesting to consider, how the different indicators in this QS World University Rankings have a different force of influence over the ranges of ranks. So we can see the top 100, it's the importance of academic and employer reputation, and then you drop off to 400 to 500, where we see faculty student ratio and international faculty and international students begin to have a stronger force of influence. Okay, so let's move on to a few more numbers. Institutions evaluated for the ranking in 2021, 1,604. Institutions who were published in the ranking is just over 1,000. 21 institutions ranked in the most recent edition. And we can see that for the top 3 in India, it's Indian Institute of Technology in Bombay, Indian Institute of Science, and Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi. So ranked 172, 185, and 193. And also, what is the average rank for India as a nation? So overall, the average rank is around 588. For academic reputation, and remember, think about academic reputation as the perception the international community has of your institution. So nationally, the average is 640, is ranked at 640 in the world. Employer, again, perception of employers and industry is 616. The faculty student ratio is 604. Citations per faculty, 413. Citations per faculty is actually the strongest indicator for Indian institutions as a whole. And international faculty ratio 962, and the international student ratio is actually the weakest indicator for Indian institutions. But it's very interesting what this shows. Actually, research is not an issue, is it? You know, we've had these tremendous policies come into place for over 30, 40 years that have enabled our research to become, you know, to become actually one of the most prominent in the world. However, if we see here the academic reputation, and this is taken from the QS survey, okay, and we'll look at that more in a bit, but you would like to think that if we're doing such great work in research, the perception that international academics have of our institutions should be slightly higher. And likewise, in terms of employers and industry, maybe it should be slightly higher. So that's something to consider, okay? The question here is not about the science or the quality of science we're doing. Think back to those bibliometric charts I showed you. There's some tremendous, the citation rate is very, very strong, and the impact factor is very, very strong. But maybe when it comes to talking about ourselves or improving the international awareness of our science and of our higher education culture, maybe that's somewhere we need to do more. And that's somewhere we as institutions need to put a few strategies in place, maybe. And this is the average rank evolution over the past 5 years, from 2017 to, excuse me, 2021. And we can see here, you know, citations per faculty, it's dropped slightly in terms of its average, but it's still, you know, it's still strong, you know, top 500 in the world. However, employer reputation has fallen quite a bit. You can see here. And also academic reputation has also gone from 454 to 640. So it's interesting to see the slight decline in reputation. Now, this may be because the average of other countries is stronger. Other countries may have seen growth in academic responses and employer responses on average. But it kind of shows us something here. We're still doing well at research in citations per faculty, but the international perception, the market perception has kind of weakened slightly. So again, it comes back to kind of looking at, well, it's to tell our story and it's to show and it's to showcase what we as institutions are doing. As I mentioned before, there's always an important story to tell, and it's knowing how to communicate this and which audiences to communicate with. Okay. And this kind of shows the number of universities within each rankings edition and the new entrants. So we can see there was one new entrant this year, and there's 21 universities. Let's go on to, whoops, why is it repeating? Yeah, and I just want to show you this. It's kind of hard to see because this is from Tableau, so it's an interactive data platform, but it's just to see, to get an idea of the trends. Okay, so we can see that in terms of overall ranking, within the top 100, within the top 200, within the top 300 is kind of more or less a smooth kind of C. There's not too much disruption. There's no progress. There's no regress. There's just slight variation. There's a lot of volatility, however, around the 700 range here. But we can see that IITB, IISC, IITD, all the institutes of technology seem to be doing seem to be achieving more or less the same ballpark over the past 3 years. But what's interesting here is to kind of see, well, how do the different indicators perform for each institution? And we can see that the average, so in terms of the average score breakdown, you can see that the IITB has, you know, is doing quite well at academic reputation. That's its strongest indicator at 20.2. And then we move to the IITD, the Indian Institute of Technology Delhi, is 17.7. And here again, there's, with the University of Delhi, academic reputation seems to be doing pretty well, but the citations per faculty is not as strong as the Institute of Technology in Guwahati, which is 15.4. So again, it's interesting to see the how each institution performs in terms of the indicator and what the strengths of that institution are according to its ranking range. So we can see University of Hyderabad is not doing too badly with citations per faculty. It's actually a strong component for that institution to achieve the average of 18.1. Okay, and these are the rankings of the institutions. As we mentioned before, IITB Bombay is 172, and we go to 185, 193, 383, and we can go to 698, the University in Pune, and any universities is 831. But to have 21 universities actually in the World University Rankings it is actually, you know, a solid achievement. Okay, looking at this in more detail, we're kind of taking here the different indicators and seeing again how each indicator contributes to that rank, what the scores are per indicator, and we can see here for the IITB, it does fairly well in employer reputation. It scores 70.2 out of 100. So that's quite significant. And you can see here for, oops, where's my pointer? Yeah, the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore is scoring 100 for citations per faculty. So research is really, really strong here. So a question would be, if we've got the IISC Bangalore here at 185, and we're scoring so highly in research, then maybe we need to be doing something more in reputation, which is 31.8. Again, this is just a tool for understanding how we can progress as institutions. So, you know, we can look further down the list here to the University in Pune. Faculty-student ratio is at 48.6. The citations are 15.4, and the academic reputation is 8.5. So, as an institution, we think, well, how can we improve the way people know us, consider us, you know, internationally on a global level? Because, as I said before, academic reputation and employer reputation, this is all about market perception, what people know about you and how they know about the good things you do. It's a simple message. And again, you know, looking at your the BRICS partners, we can see the situation in Brazil. You know, 1 university in the Global 200, 4 universities in the Global 500. We can see University of Sao Paulo is very strong for academic reputation. You know, 88.6 it scores. Also moving on to Russia, 1 university in the Global 100. They're doing fairly well across most indicators. Their scores out of 100 per each indicator. You can see academic reputation, 77.3. Employer reputation is very significant there at 82.8. This means that the international academic community and the employer community are actually recognizing this institution quite strongly. And we can see how these the performance per indicator varies across the different rankings ranges for Russian institutions. Now, when we get to China, we can see that there's 6 universities in the Global 100, and there's a fairly uniform performance across the, you know, from 1 to the rank ranges of 1 to 50 here. They're all scoring quite strongly in academic reputation and employer reputation and in citations, and also in the faculty-student ratio. And you can see that's where variation occurs in the top 500. You see how there's variation across the scoring for each indicator here. And that goes back to the correlations, as I mentioned before. And now looking at South Africa, 4 universities in the Global 500. We can see University of Cape Town, University of Witwatersrand as well, and, you know, 3 universities from 500 to 1,000. Now, let's think about reputation indicators a little bit more. So, you know, again, this refers to how people respond to this survey, which is 40% of the rankings. And, you know, in 2021, there were just over 100,000 responses to the academic survey. And this is something quite unique to QS, this survey. Other rankings organisations don't have it. And this is, you know, from me, from a strategic perspective, the survey kind of serves as an interesting tool. You know, in academic reputation and employer reputation data can serve as an interesting tool to help us understand where we need to work more and how we can communicate more. So Let me just go here. And likewise, the employer survey, they just had over 50,000 responses in the 2021 edition of the rankings. And these maps, they're put in here to show the geographical extent, let's call it the geographical diversity of responses. Okay? And it's always interesting to think about the geographical diversity of awareness. If I'm at an institution, one of the first things we need to think about is, well, what's the international awareness? What's the geographical extent of our university brand? Who knows us overseas? Who are we talking to overseas? And how are we building upon our relationships overseas? What bridges are we building? So it works for equally, it works for employers. So just to reiterate the point, over 100,000 responses globally for the academic survey, and over 50,000 responses globally for the employer survey. A bit more data here in terms of the survey. So in number of institutions nominated by academics in 2021 was 5,381, and that's up from 4,983 in 2020. So that's an increase of almost 8% in the number of institutions nominated by academics. In terms of academic reputation, these are the top 15 in the world. Academic reputation is at 40%. And obviously it may come as no surprise that we see Harvard as #1 for academic reputation, Cambridge, Oxford, Stanford, MIT, Yale, Princeton, as composing this kind of leadership list. And for employer reputation, that changes slightly because, well, Harvard is at the top, but number 11, you've got the LSE, number 12, you've got the University of Tokyo. So that in terms of employer reputation, we see more diversity there. Now, in terms of academic reputation and how Indian institutions rank in that particular indicator, we can see that IITB, Bombay, is within the top 200 in the world. And, it's not so clear, this chart, but it's just to get an idea of variance and trend. So you can see between the top 100 and just, let's say between the 100 and 300, there's kind of minimal variation here in terms of academic reputation performance. There's no substantial increase, there's no substantial decrease. And kind of here as well, between 500 and 700, there's a little bit more variation, but not too much. And it kind of goes back to that chart of national averages. Citations are extremely strong, but that's not mirrored in terms of the academic and employer reputation average. In terms of employer reputation, there's more variance to the trend here. So, but that variation tends to happen between, let's say, 450 and 700 or 750. This is a zone variation. It's quite a volatile zone of change, always between 450 and 750 actually. But here, this is the most competitive area possible. And institutions do well just to maintain their position. It's actually very tough to advance in the top 100 in these specific indicators. In terms of numbers for reputation, 2019, 2020, and 2021, we can see, and this is to illustrate the diversity of responses over the last 3 years to the responses in the to the academic survey that's sent out. So we can see that USA, UK, and Australia, and Malaysia actually as well, and Russia, they've had very they've provided very healthy responses to the survey. But it's interesting here. There's Mexico, there's Germany, there's China, and there's Chile. So it definitely shows that we're dependent on responses from these 4 to 5 nations. And it would be interesting to see how we can begin to diversify the response rate or the nomination rate of Indian universities. So when I say to diversify the response rate, is to diversify geographically. We can see, for example, that France is not in there. We can see that, luckily, good thing Brazil is in there, but there's Argentina's not in there, for example. Certain African nations aren't in there. So it's about how we begin to understand which strategies we need to adopt. And I'm going back to that point of globally engaging, how we're participating and leading globally through what we do best and through what we're good at. It goes back to that point I mentioned right at the start. So again, this is another way of showing the indicator scores for academic reputation. And we can see that, as we saw, the IITB is quite strong here. And we can go down to the Institute of Technology Delhi, the University of Delhi, and then the IISc Bangalore. But when you compare it also with how China is performing in this indicator, it's quite interesting given, and again, this is just a footnote, but what can we correlate with this? How is it the way China are internationalizing their research? Is it somehow correlated with all these patents they have in force? Is it somehow correlated with the expenditure on research and development that's increased substantially over the past 5 years, for example? So this is just interesting to see. And Lomonosov in Russia scores, quite well in academic reputation, but just below University of Sao Paulo. And these are very historical institutions: USP in Brazil, Lomonosov, Moscow State University in Russia, and Peking University. These are very kind of historical institutions with a lot of international networks as well. Okay. In terms of employer reputation, and employer reputation is in fact quite a challenging indicator, and that it shows in the responses. Academic reputation has over 100,000 this year, 100,000 responses. Employer reputation has around 50,000. So, but we can see here that IITB does very, very well at 74.2. Lomonosov scores well, and University of Paolo also. But again, Peking University, in terms of employer responses to the survey, is very, very, very strong. So, as we said before, research output is not an issue for Indian universities. It's the citations per faculty performance is strong. And we can see here that the IISc in Bangalore is actually second in the world for citations per faculty. So it's not research. And we can see here very kind of stable performance, except for a few variations here and there. But between 1 and 350, it's very stable. And there's actually some positive variation to the trend over the past 3 years. So, as we said before, and as we saw in terms of the averages, in terms of the indicator scores, citations research output is not it's a value asset to Indian institutions. It's where research is happening. And this again is by virtue, quite possibly, of the policies which I mentioned at the start, that enabled this research to be cultivated and to achieve these global standards. It's actually very, very impressive. And we can see here I understand this seems like an onslaught of data, but I'm trying to put as much in as possible in the time that's allocated, because what I want to then move on to is, once we've looked at all this data, is then talking about the strategy. That for me is actually more important. As I mentioned before, data is a consequence of strategic decisions, behaviours and actions. But just going back to research output, we can see there's been an increase in 82.3% of publications. And this is from 2017, 89,245 publications. We've gone to 162,668 publications. And just look at those citations, how they outweigh the publications. That's quite impressive. So that's an indication of quality. What you don't want is to have more publications than citations. But again, by virtue of the policies put into place over the past 50 years, I would say this is where we're at. They've enabled this quality research to occur. And this is just a share of research output evolution. I'll be sending these slides on to the organisation, and you can all look at this in your own time. But again, in terms of the global share, we've actually gone from 0.87 in 2017 to 1.31. And again, we'd expect more, but we have to think that also China and the USA are increasing their research output yearly. So, and that's probably why it's dropped from 1.41 to 1.31. Okay. And again, share of research impact evolution. Okay. I don't want to spend too much time on this, because I want to try and get on to speaking about strategy, which as I said, is the most important thing. And in terms of citations per faculty, that indicator is worth 20% in the World University Rankings. We can see IISc Bangalore is up there. It's just surpassed USTC China. So again, research in the Indian context, Indian universities, it's actually where the leadership is. If you remember that final policy milestone I put into place, I mentioned that policy was to enable leadership. We go from participation to leadership. And this is where India really does show leadership in terms of its research quality. This is what the data shows. Again, this is what the Elsevier data shows, the bibliometric data. And as I mentioned before, that's just one instrument among a few others that can help us better understand the situation in which we need to plan and which we need to move ahead and navigate. In terms of faculty-student ratio, this seeks to be a proxy for teaching quality. It's not perfect. It's very hard to assess teaching quality. But again, Manipal features here 54.5, but the Russians do exceptionally well here. The Russian institutions, University of Sao Paulo, University Federal of Sao Paulo also. But again, I don't want to dwell too much on these numbers. I don't want us to get too far into the data so that we begin to lose sight of what strategy is. Okay, in terms of international faculty and international students, these are the top 15 in the world. And we can see here that the Arab Emirates does exceptionally well in this indicator. In both in this indicator and in the international students indicator, not too much of a surprise, but London Business School, but also Macau University of Science and Technology is number 2, and Ajman in the UAE is number 3. Okay. But this is just to give you an idea of the type of institutions that are within the top 15. And the indicators for international faculty. we can see here, Liverpool Jarton University is top. It's scoring very, very well in this area. But Brazil really does have a challenge here for recruiting international faculty. You can see here. And again, this is an instrument for understanding. For example, if we're at one of these universities in Brazil, or we are a university in Brazil, and we want to attain a competitive advantage in the market, we'll have to think about the recruitment strategy, or maybe, allocating some resource for several postdocs, international postdocs. So, again, it's about strategy, it's about planning. These indicators are to help us with planning. They shouldn't be to say, this institution is performing poorly. It should be to say, this institution needs to adopt or should adopt or is in a position to adopt an international recruitment strategy, for example. And again, that brings into play different factors, how people know about us, what they know about us. Why would international students want to come to our campus? Why would the international faculty want to come to our campus? What are the opportunities for research we can offer, for example? It's all about opportunity and experience, equally for the student, as it is for the researcher, as it is for tenured faculty. It's all about opportunity and experience. So all of them are driven by passion. The researcher is driven by passion to develop his research in his field of science. Okay, the student is driven by the passion to experience other cultures and to obtain the necessary skills to get good employment. So again, that's more. These are the more strategic dimensions that factor into university planning, and that's why these indicators again should be taken as strategic signposts, as strategic tools. And again, international students. This is, I don't want to spend too much time on these slides, but you can see here that Brazil kind of, struggles with international students compared to South Africa and compared to China and compared to Russia. Russia over the past, I would say, 5 years have had a very strong recruitment drive, and it's interesting to be interesting to see a few case studies from Russia on how they've recruited international students, where they recruited international students from, and the opportunities they've provided as well. And at this stage, I'll just mention the subject rankings that were released this year for Indian institutions. Again, I'm going to move through this quite quickly. I don't know how much time we've got left. So I'm in different time zones. I'm looking at my watch and I'm slightly confused about the time right now. But you can see here, for each different faculty area, the subjects carry a different weight. So for the arts and humanities, we can see academic reputation is very, very significant there. So, international, survey nominations matter a lot for the arts and humanities, for the subject rankings. In engineering and technology, we can see that there's, it's a uniform 40% survey responses in academic reputation and 30% for employer. That constitutes 70% of market perception for subject rankings in engineering and technology. Here we get slightly more variance, but not, when you get to the life sciences and medicine, where you see that academic reputation and citations begin to be the dominant factors in ranked subjects for the life science and medicine. And natural sciences, slightly more variation again, but look, for example, geography, you get 60% academic reputation, you see? So nominations really do matter for geography. But again, it's 40% academic reputation here with variation in employer reputation. and especially for social sciences and management, for the subjects in there, academic reputation, again, is a strong factor. So this is, again, about, yes, definitely research output for life sciences and natural sciences is citations and age index, as you can see up there, but still reputation matters. International perception of the work you do. And I'll just show you a few things here. This is how institutions in India rank in terms of the subjects. So you can see IITB in art and design is 59 in the world. Again, linguistics, IITD, Delhi, 166. So the kind of national profile for subjects is very strong and encouraging for India. You see? Again, you know, I can send these slides on and you can all look at this in your own time, but especially as you would expect, when you get to engineering and technology and thinking back to all those, to what those policies put in place over 50 years, it's not surprising to see that there are institutions in the top 100 or the top 50 even across the subjects in engineering and technology. And computer science and information systems, you can see that there's a very strong presence of Indian institutions, likewise for electrical engineering and aeronautical and chemical engineering. So again, it's thinking back to what those policies enable. And it's also thinking about how we can further internationalize our higher education, research and innovation profile through the way we perform in these subjects. Life sciences and medicine, we're not in the top 50 or the top 100, but we have a presence in the top 200, you see here. So IISc Bangalore 172, Kharagpur is 184 for agriculture and forestry, and then Manipal is 200 for pharmacy and pharmacology. Natural sciences, as you would expect, again, by virtue of the policies, we can see we've got two institutions here in the top 100 for chemistry, IISc and IITB. And material science as well. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on social sciences and management, two institutions in the top 100, IIM and IIM Bangalore, okay? And you've got here University of Delhi for development studies, very interesting case here, 41 in the world for development studies. So if I'm at the University of Delhi, that's a value asset for me as an institution. That's something I'm going to build upon and strategize around, that area of development studies. That's very interesting. In fact, the only Indian institution to be featured in development studies. Okay, finally, I'm not sure how much time we've got left, but strategic considerations. And kind of, let's think back to what we said at the beginning. We kind of said, well, it's important to participate globally. Every university has something to offer. Every university has a story to tell. And every university needs to raise the awareness of what the international community has about our institution, about Indian institutions, and about the science and research that's done in India. So with that in mind, in terms of rankings, what is it we can do as institutions? Well, we can submit 400 academic contacts to the survey, to QS for the academic survey. We can submit 400 employer contacts. We can put our data into QS Hub. That's That's where they hold all the information about the universities. We can work with Elsevier on any name variations our institution may have within the database. But in terms of data we submit, that's about it. Right? We can't do more than that. That's why data, you know, all these indices are a consequence of the strategic decisions we adopt and the strategies we develop. But there are strategic practices. You can see that the practices, the strategy requirements outweighs the data requirements. And that's what I kind of said at the start. So as an institution, what are the best practices we can begin thinking about? So we can begin to improve visibility across key areas of our institution. So, for example, I mentioned University of Delhi, 41 in the world for development studies. If I'm at the institution, I think, right, how are we going to really make this one of the leading places in the world for development studies? Okay, how do we make the work we do more visible? Okay, and it may be that we need to improve the way our researchers talk to our planning department and talk to our international partners. There's so many different things involved. So, institution, and these are all best practices. We need to adopt actions which unify key departments. This is very, very important, okay? Because this is about building the external brand or the external awareness of what we do. And to enable that to happen, several different departments have to work together. Definitely we as institutions, first and foremost, need to identify what we're good at if we're to be prepared to talk about it. So we need to kind of think, well, what are the assets we have in research? What are our strengths in research? And what's the important research we're doing? It may be in social outreach, it may be in community development, but we need to identify that because these are we're going to communicate internationally. And also in terms of our programs, okay? What is it that our programs can offer? What are the opportunities that our programs carry? Okay, so again, it's thinking and it's kind of identifying, you know, research and academic assets that define our leadership and that enable our international brand and enable an international awareness of what we do. We also, you know, reach and connect key departments with improved communications. Absolutely. Is communication an issue at university? Yes. Is it an issue between departments? Yes. Is it this? I see it constantly at universities. So the more we begin to improve our communications between our researchers, between our planners, between our international office, between the people who talk to industry, then, you know, the moment we begin to strengthen communication and a shared understanding between key people and key departments, then absolutely we can begin to strengthen the external awareness of what our university does. Many universities don't really, they find the word brand a challenge. Okay, how can we develop an international brand? How can we build an international reputation? Because they view it externally as an external reality. The key is bridging departments internally and improving internally. The moment that happens, 50% of the work is done. It's very hard to build an external reputation if you haven't got internal communications or if you haven't got internal collaboration. Okay, Moving on, that's a more operational, managerial aspect of things, but it's very, very important. So the other aspect, identifying and managing your partnerships. Okay, all universities, whether you're a community university or an advanced research institute, you have to know who your partners are, okay? Nationally, regionally, or internationally. And you have to begin looking at the way you work with those partners. Which partners are closer to you? Which partners have been with you on a very long journey so far? Okay, so that's very, very important, because this is also important for your national brand and your regional brand. Okay, how you engage with partners. There's a lot to say on partnerships, and I'm happy to talk about it at another time. Partnerships we can spend several days talking about, but for the moment, what I can say, identify who your key partners are and make that part of what you talk about your university, how you narrate the value of your university. Okay, then what you've got to do is you have to map your alumni. Who are your alumni? Are you in constant communication with your alumni? Does your alumni contribute or participate in your university in different ways? So again, the same with employers. Do employers come to your campus? What's the conversation you're having with employers? Are you developing new programs or curriculum with your employers? Are you bridging the skills gap by listening to employers? Yeah. Are you providing short courses in collaboration with industry employers? Micro programs, for example. So again, this is another very, very big area, but equally important. These are best practices for a university, and these should be adopted by all universities as well as community universities. Okay. Adopt branding and marketing practices. Well, we've spoken about that a little bit. And as I mentioned, bring employers and industry closer to the institution. Innovate interaction and participation. So as institutions, we need to be kind of agile as well. We need to be prepared to innovate and we talk about ourselves and we develop international relations and national relations as well. But as I said before, these are kind of standard best practices. And on each of these things, we could spend several days talking about. And what I'd like to kind of to you now is, well, what defines a global ranked institution? You could remove the word ranked and just say global, or you could remove the word global and put ranked, because if you have best practices and if you engage globally, then this will be reflected in rankings. Interaction and participation with industry, strong alumni network, strong research network, and strong employer network, nationally and internationally. International programs, okay? Program in international curriculum. When I mean international curriculum, it means a modern curriculum, a curriculum that meets the expectations of industry and employers. That's what I mean by that, okay? It means innovating with program collaboration across networks. And it means innovating with programs that are national, modern, and linked to industries. The big thing in the future now is how universities are going to have to provide micro programs, very focused programs that are developed The other characteristic is international research. It doesn't mean necessarily that you're publishing large amounts with international partners. That's good if it's happening, but it's the way you talk about or you pick up on topical research and cutting edge areas. You don't have to provide a big research paper on it. You can just provide commentary on it. So as institutions, we need to think, well, how are our professors and our researchers contributing to international commentary about hot topics of the day? It can be nationally as well. It doesn't have to be topics that are happening around the world. It can be on a national level. How are our professors giving opinion and commentary on these important issues in the nation today? Okay. And of course, research that is new, interesting and curious. Okay. Another aspect is international mobility. Recognised for strong teaching and learning practices, maybe inclusion in rankings, indices, and a globally recognised brand driven by science. Your brand can be driven by anything you're good at. Okay, you don't have to be doing the latest work in photonics. Okay, if you're doing important work at the community level, that's equally as valuable to building your brand, but it's a way it has to be communicated to the world at large. As I said before, there's a permanent international interest to know about what's happening, to know about interesting things that are going on through universities. It's about narrative. People will always want to hear an interesting story. And narrative is the biggest challenge to universities, how they talk about themselves and how they tell their story. So that brings us to the last characteristic, which is international brand. Okay, a globally recognized brand driven by science, areas of science, areas of community work. Again, that example of the University of Delhi, for 41 in the world for development studies. What is it doing in that field, for example? Recognize strong teaching and learning practices. Okay, that builds a brand. A name that is associated with pioneering and captivating activities, or a name that is associated with interesting stories. Also, what helps build an international brand is international researchers and postdocs want to experience the opportunity the brand promises, and students likewise. Now, for all this to happen, as I mentioned before, we kind of have to overcome what we call the silo effect. Okay. So what are silos? A lot of the institutions I've seen have this issue. Okay. These are operational gaps at a university. What this is gaps that stop the university operating in a consistent way to enable its brand to develop and to enable the message to reach international audiences or even national audiences. So you can call these academic silos or organizational silos. Okay. Now, this happens when research centers, faculty and departments operate in isolation and they walk in different directions. Okay. The consequence is a lack of institutional collaboration across key areas. So that's what automatically weakens the university in its attempt to sustain or build an international brand. Silos can exist between academic departments and central services. And this is where a lack of a unifying strategy results in divisions, which become part of institutional operations. I've seen situations where we've had the leading researcher sitting in the room in meetings and the marketing department didn't know what the researcher was working on. So that's a kind of disjunct. That's a gap that needs to be bridged. Okay, so what this means also is strong academic PR initiatives. When I say academic PR initiatives, see this as narration or telling your story, okay? These remain unknown and unshared. And I'd like you to think back to the rankings charts per indicator where we saw in India, the average for citations per faculty is extremely high. It's very strong. For academic reputation, the national average is slightly lower. And, you know, where we've got great research, we would hope to see academic reputation be of an equal standing. So it comes back to talking about how we're promoting what we're good at, how we're telling our story. And this often has to do with internal operations of a university. So strong academic PR initiatives remain unknown and unshared. Silos or divisions between departments impact brand development, international and reputation. Absolutely, you can be sure of that. The moment you begin to link departments, then brand development, internationalization and reputation can increase. All right. So an institution needs to achieve a consistent level of communication, collaboration and strategic understanding between research centres, academics and key departments. Right. And as I said before, external bridges which are built cannot be sustained if internal operations lack consistency. And this is a common problem across the world with hundreds of universities, within the top 500, within the top 300, within the top 200. You can be sure there are these, there's a disjunct occurring that needs to be, and these gaps need to be kind of filled in with a shared understanding and a shared mandate of operations. So what I say at the bottom, shared strategic efforts are required to enable the reputation and global awareness of Indian universities to increase and to have a positive reflection in rankings. Now, my passion and enthusiasm here is not to see, it's not, really only to see Indian institutions advance in rankings. No, it's to see Indian institutions more globally engaged, globally recognized and globally acknowledged. That's what's driving me to present today. So strategy for me is more important than rankings at the end of the day, okay? Because strategy will drive your sustainability and your ability and agility to participate globally. And as I've said before, every institution has something interesting to offer, to show. Yeah? And this is the material that can build bridges nationally, regionally, and internationally. But in order for us to get that material together and to mix it properly, we have to make sure that internally our operations are aligned and there's good shared understanding and communication. Now, I'm rolling on a bit. I think we've got 8 o'clock, 9, we've got 20 minutes or so left. I'll stop here. I'll stop just after this so we can talk, we can take some questions and maybe have a dialogue and conversation about these things. But what is a strategic mandate and message? Well, this is what you would expect to see from a university. Tell our story, build our brand through our science and the work we do. when I say science, I'm not referring to astrophysics. I'm not referring to bio-nanotechnology. I'm referring to the research you do. Okay, it can be physics, it can be medicine, it can be community development, it can be development studies. But we have to build our brand through those assets. Okay. We need to establish strategic partners. Okay. What's a strategic partner? It's not a standard partner where we just have a research agreement. It's a partner that's going to accompany us on our development and contribute to our growth and development. As I said before, we can speak much more about this. Work. This is very important. Work closely with industry, increase the level of industry participation through new programs, skills-based training, continuing professional development, micro programs supported by employers and industry. It's very, very important. Become a contributor and participant in new emerging trends. Maybe there's new fields we can provide commentary on. Maybe we have researchers that can contribute to a certain field through a webinar or through an online seminar, and not necessarily a publication. But again, for that to happen, we have to have the contacts, we have to know how to move forward. Ideally, we need to drive interdisciplinary research. We've seen this now for around 20 years, the need for interdisciplinary research. We called it multidisciplinary, once upon a time, and then it became interdisciplinary. And depending on which part of the world you're in, someone will say transdisciplinary. But anyway, it's bridging our researchers across different fields of science and society. And we can all be doing that. So that means we have to deploy our resources very creatively. Okay, and this is all about strategy. We have to deploy our thinkers, we have to deploy our revenue, we have to deploy our efforts in a very strategic way that serves regional and national interests, as well as serves global awareness, the global awareness of what we do. And also we need to innovate innovative learning experiences, enable innovative learning experiences, maybe through our physical and virtual environments that we provide students with, or maybe through the curriculum, or maybe through the relationships we have with employers and industry. For sure, employers now, they don't just want to be there to provide an internship. Internships will still continue, yeah, but in terms of our interaction with employers and industry, we have to think beyond that. We have to now bridge the gap between universities and employers and think far more creatively and collaboratively. And just to say, well, how do you tell your story? Well, research at Bristol. Bristol is a very, very good example of this. Go to their website, have a look. I've always been impressed with the way they show and talk about the research they do. And again, it's, well, look, as an institution, we have to think about what if our website does justice to the research we do and to the qualities we've developed as a higher education university, as a higher education institution. So this is a good kind of example of how to begin telling your story and talking about yourselves and just showing what you're good at or showing the good things you're doing. But again, as I said before, the universal law for this, and this is not in a rankings context here, this is in the context of institutional development, okay? We have to make sure we have a research division that's working with an international division, that's working with a PR and Marcoms division. We have to get those three departments in place and make sure there's unity between them for us to start telling our story effectively, to building our brand. Why is it important for these three departments to work together? Science does not communicate itself independently of culture, okay? And our science is a diplomatic vehicle for communicating our culture as well. Whether we're a Russian institution, we communicate the virtues of our science and the virtue of our Russian culture. The same with Brazilian institutions, and the same as it would be for Indian institutions. Our science is the international and diplomatic vehicle for communicating our culture. And in order to do that effectively, we have to make sure that these three departments are working together. Okay? Because that creates the identity of our university, and it creates the identity of our national context as well. If we want international students and international faculty to come to our university, then we have to definitely talk about our science, but also about our culture. And throughout history, science and culture are not separate. Okay, they're interlinked vehicles for one another. And I think that's a very, very important point we have to think about here in terms of building our brand and building our identity in what we call a globalized world. And again, this moves into areas which we could spend a long time talking about, how us as university build an identity and sustain an identity through strategy in a globalized order of the world. Look, for example, we're seeing a tremendous amount of change in trade relations, in certain geopolitical scenarios today, socioeconomic scenarios, and all these inevitably will factor in to the destiny of our future as an institution. I was giving a talk a little while ago on how trade relations prefigure or can be a proxy for opportunities and new trends and new emerging trends. So, you know, that's another area we can talk about at another time. It requires a little bit of focus and more time. But anyway, yeah, international research and PR and marcons, definitely very, very important, because they control brand destiny and reputation, the identity of your university nationally, regionally, and internationally. Sorry, I'm losing my voice a bit here. And again, how do you talk about yourselves? I'm giving the example, reiterating the example of how the University of Bristol does it. You don't have to be as large as the University of Bristol. You don't have to be engaging in all the global grand challenges they are. Again, you could be working at the community level, but it's how you show and talk about what you do. That's very, very important to your brand. There will always be interested people overseas who want to know more about what you do, okay? This is not just about the high priority areas and the sciences of advanced technologies. It's also about community work, community development, and all those UN goals we all know very well. But it's about how we communicate ourselves and how we create that identity. And I'd encourage you to just have a look at the University of Bristol, how they talk, how they show, how they, remember I mentioned the word before, visibility, how they enable more visibility about what they do and what they're good at. How they show their research assets, their community development assets, and this creates their leadership. Right, so as not to take too much of your time, I just kind of go back to something very, very simple. Kind of how are we using low-cost, high-impact platforms? Are we using LinkedIn effectively? Are we using Twitter? Are we using YouTube? universities are in the habit of using Facebook quite a lot. That works for students, okay? That works at a certain level to establish what you would call the grapevine of popular, or popular grapevine, let's call it that. But in terms of professional social media, are we using LinkedIn effectively to talk about ourselves and to show other professional communities what we're doing? LinkedIn is a tremendous platform. I think it's misperceived sometimes as a place just to go to look for new jobs. It shouldn't be. It's actually a tremendous platform for enabling visibility of the institution. And again, look at how universities like Bristol are doing it. What are they posting on LinkedIn? Look at the research they're talking about. Look at the community development they're talking about. This also goes to Twitter as well, but Twitter is more, these are short, sharp messages in Twitter. So the mode of communication is different. Okay, but think about low cost or no cost, high impact platforms of global communication. Every university has something to show and talk about. And if we look at how MIT use Twitter and LinkedIn, we can see that they're talking about Department of Mechanical Engineering. These are one of their professors, design and hands-on courses, skills development. Again, look, 1,230 responses, 22 comments, 54,000 views. Well, you kind of expect that for an institution as big as MIT, but we have to start somewhere. And let's start thinking about how to use LinkedIn. Again, Bristol, obviously, the past 6 months have been dominated by talk of this unfortunate pandemic. But they were featuring their research on this and what they were doing with the NHS Trust. And again, take this as a blueprint or a best practice example of how you can be doing something. In terms of micro-credential courses, University Technology Sydney is a very, very, very good example. I'd encourage you to look at bridging the gap between University of Industry and providing those skills that industry is really in need of right now. And again, this is just another example. Okay, I've spoken quite a lot, and there's one more aspect, but I won't cover that too much today. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for your patience, for your ears, and for your time. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to present today. And I think this program that's been put together is tremendous, and it's very good for capacity building and training. So congratulations on the organisers. Thank you to the attendees for attending, and it's been my pleasure presenting to you today.
I think we should thank you rather, Dr. Riccio, for your time and efforts. It's been a really informative talk, which we'll be forced to reintrospect ourselves and really pick some good points we are still missing. I'm really thankful to you, Dr. Riccio, for accepting our offer of this talk. We have few questions if you want to take.
Okay, sure.
Dr. Amit.
Good. Hello, sir. So,
Dr. Amit, please carry on.
Thank you, sir, for an informative session, because whatever you have suggested for the Indian Institute, definitely we will take up, and probably we would like to also go for on a global map. So thank you, sir, for providing such wonderful information. So, sir, if you allow me, then there are a few questions that which I can collect from the chat box. So I can ask you, sir.
Sure, okay.
Okay. So, sir, the first question is from Utkarsh Mangal. So, sir, you have said 50% of the world ranking are about perception. Could you give
Yes, yeah.
some example how that perception is created?
Okay, so let's break it down then. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, just. Okay, we're on. Okay. Okay, so there's different sides to this question. So let me tell you about the survey a little bit. So let's take academic reputation. That survey is sent out to academics all over the world. There were over 100,000 responses this year. Those national and international academics will nominate the universities they believe to be good in certain fields. Yeah. Okay. So what universities can do is submit up to 400 academic contacts each year to QS. Okay, and that will go into this big database of contacts who will be sent the survey. And that's all the institution can do in terms of data. Okay. Now, if someone in the US nominates an institution in India, it means they have familiarity and an awareness of what that institution is doing in a specific field in India. And likewise, that goes for any other country that nominates an institution in India. Maybe they've had research collaboration with them. Maybe they've seen something on professional social media, which they found very interesting, and they've looked more into that and into the institution. Okay. But what this ultimately means is that it's down to the institution, okay, to develop the international awareness of what it's doing, right? Because all it can do in terms of this rankings in this index is just to send 400 academic contacts, okay? But as an institution, it's far more of a strategic question. So how are we talking about ourselves, and what news about our university are we putting out there? Okay, we can be doing good work in science and or in community development. We may have a very, very important role in the community. So I mentioned the example of IPH, but Institute of Public Health in Bangalore, only because I was quite familiar with them 10 years ago, and because I was very well aware of the role, the very, very, very important role they had in the community, okay, with all these medical challenges that they were helping overcome and find solutions to at the community level. So that's just an example. So work we do at the community level and at the scientific level is so very important to be communicating. We have to also understand that there is a gap in international awareness. We cannot expect the international community to know about India, Indian higher education, or Indian science, or Indian institutions in detail. Okay, so we have a double responsibility or a double challenge to bridge those gaps of knowledge. So wherever we may be as a university, we may be doing good work in science, education, and community work. And it's those three aspects we're going to use in our international communications through LinkedIn, through YouTube, for example, but I prefer LinkedIn, to show the international community about what we're doing. And that enables us to begin to fill in these gaps of international awareness. I can reverse the situation. I can say, okay, you as an Indian institution, do you know where the interesting work is being done in Saudi Arabia? Or do you know the difference between the institutions in Saudi Arabia? You probably don't, because Saudi Arabia also has, doing tremendous work in science and community development and community outreach. And they also need to educate the international community about these different levels of good work they're doing. And the same with Brazil. People, you know, the international community, they need to be educated as to the difference of the Brazilian regions and the Brazilian states. There's so much variation. And that's where it's very, very important for a university to build its identity. This is all about building your identity and sustaining and promoting your identity internationally so that people become aware of what you're doing and what your particular part of India is doing as well. And this, we can call this branding. To kind of call it marketing, it kind of devalues the exercise. And I suppose the word branding devalues the exercise because it's definitely about communicating your values, okay? Communicating the good work you do to international audiences, not just in the UK or USA, but also in Brazil and in Russia. But how do we do that? Okay, well, so firstly, what we have to do is look at how we're using professional social media and how we've identified what we need to talk about. So that will affect market perception. Our identity affects market perception, okay? So in terms of rankings, we can just submit the list. It doesn't guarantee people are going to nominate us. And that's why I said strategy matters more to me in the first instance. Strategy is a proxy for development and sustainability of science and culture, and they both go together. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but that's what I can say at the moment.
Okay, thank you, sir. We will take up your suggestion and probably try to improve for the same. Now, another question from Dr. Chitrakant Sahu, who is a faculty at our institute, MNIT Jaipur. He is asking that how to measure academic reputation of institute. Academic reputation of institute.
Okay, are you talking about in terms of rankings or?
Probably sir, it is in terms of the ranking only, that how to measure the academic reputation of institute.
Yeah, well, they have, you know, QS has its own data. Each institution has its academic and employer responses in QS. That's QS data. So QS have that data on how different institutions are performing in terms of academic nominations and responses.
Okay.
So that's QS data.
Okay, so probably, sir, he would like to know that what are the parameters that is being considered that for a academic reputation, especially.
Okay, so let's talk about quickly. Employer reputation is 50%. A domestic nomination is worth 50%, and an international nomination is worth 50%. Okay. For academic reputation, an international nomination is worth 85%, and a domestic nomination is worth 15%. So in terms of the rankings index, what matters is for an institution to receive more international nominations. But for employer reputation, national nominations from who receive the survey are equally as important as international nominations.
Okay, thank you, sir. So another question from Deva Ranjan, that he would like to know that as an individual, how one can connect with the international research and researcher. What are the tips that you want to suggest for them?
Okay, this is another 2-hour topic, but
so maybe it is up to you if you want to answer, sir.
No, absolutely. I will honor your question. Okay. Networking is very, very important. So I would definitely, as if I was a researcher, I would definitely see which professional associations and memberships I already belong to. Okay. I would already be looking at who I can connect to on LinkedIn, other researchers in the same area or similar areas that might have a mutual interest in the topic I'm looking at. Now, you know, the age-old practice was going around conferences and meeting people and exchanging cards and saying, yeah, you know, stay in contact. But I think we kind of have to be a little bit more sophisticated these days, and definitely use social. Reach out to people through LinkedIn. Absolutely, reach out to people through LinkedIn. And also see where there are particular forums online and also physical forums for me to talk about the work I'm doing. As I mentioned before, it can be in areas of science, it can be community outreach, community development. Your science can be anything you make it. But there are but whatever science you're looking at, you can, there's forums for that. Obviously, publications is slightly different, but in terms of communicating or linking up with other researchers, look at LinkedIn, okay? Look at for professional societies, for example. Professional societies is very, very important. Also, look at for particular forums, forums and LinkedIn groups as well. There's LinkedIn groups that are composed of researchers on specific research topics. And don't hesitate to just look people up at universities and reach out to them and say, hey, I found you through the university website. I'm doing work in this area. I'd like to, you know, whenever you're ready, I'd like to share some ideas with you, or if you're able for a web conference or something like that. So don't hesitate in reaching out to people. Professional social media, forums, physical and virtual, okay? And go to the universities you are actually interested in, find the researchers and reach out to them. People do science, whatever science that may be, because of a passion. And, you know, they're always willing to collaborate and share and talk about their passion. So that's my immediate advice in the 3 minutes. I've answered your question.
Okay. Thank you, sir, for your advice. I think he will take up for that. Another question from Vidyasagar Kumar, sir. If international students and international standard have made more important indicator, then why local activity and student skills, students development and development of local language have not get counted for a institutional ranking? So, sir,
yeah, okay.
Question is that regarding the local activity and student skill, why it is not counted for a institutional ranking?
Yeah, you're right. Because I mean, what we're looking at here is the world university rankings, and it'll be, you know, as I don't put the rankings together, but it would be a huge kind of challenge because what this is about, really, your question is about social impact, actually,
Yes,
and local impact. And you know, previously before QS, I worked a lot in that area in Brazil on social impact strategy. So to actually measure social impact of each country by state is a very, very huge undertaking. Okay, social impact is something extremely difficult to measure because you can have work with hospitals, work with schools, work with special needs, and this brings in so many different factors that I don't think, from my own opinion, okay, I don't think it would be able for a ranking to kind of capture. Now, saying that, just because a ranking doesn't include it, that's rankings methodology. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't be promoting it. And what you've said there about skills development is a key issue for the UN development goals. So we should be promoting what we're doing as an institution in that area through the specific platforms and forums. There's one link I put in here earlier, which is it's called RELX, SDG Resource Center. And we should be definitely communicating with units in the SDG Resource Centre or other kind of UN derivative organisations and think tanks to be talking about these sort of things. So because rankings methodology doesn't include it yet, that shouldn't be one of the challenges. It's a challenge for rankings methodology. One of our virtues may be a challenge for rankings methodology, and rankings may have to adapt itself in the future. But now you've said that, I definitely encourage you to because this sounds like it's one of your institutional assets, the value propositions of your institution. And I think you have to be leveraging this and communicating this through the platforms I've just mentioned. So I'm not sure if I answered your question. I completely understand where you're coming from, completely.
Okay.
But as I mentioned before, remember what I said before, rankings is not this universal law or rule. It's just one instrument among many. And that's what I'd like us to keep thinking about. It's one instrument among many. Maybe the instrument needs sharpening a bit more, okay? But for the time, yeah, that's... I'm not sure if I answered your question, but...
Okay, thank you.
Again, that's a very huge, important area. It's so very important, and I completely understand and identify with what you're saying, completely, because social impact is something very, very important.
Okay. Thank you, sir. For one last question, sir. Dr. Prasanna would like to know that what is the criteria for the selection of the top university? Is there any eligibility for a ranking? So probably, sir, he wants to know about the QS ranking, that what are the parameters that you are considering for actually ranking for a particular university?
Oh, what, to enter into the rankings?
So, sir, probably he would like to know about any eligibility there, that it is self-call, or maybe you are taking it from the database that for a ranking, for eligibility of any particular institute.
Okay, well, okay. So first, I think it'd be very good for any university that's interested to begin submitting data to QS and to reach out to the rankings team at QS to see if they can be assessed for inclusion. There's different criteria. So, for example, a minimum of 1,000 publications, for example, in Scopus. And you've got to be comprehensive. You have to have more than 3. You have to have a comprehensive portfolio of programs. You have to be undergraduate and postgraduate. So there's all this criteria. I'd really encourage you to get in contact with the rankings team if you're interested, and to begin submitting data. They've got all the criteria on QS Hub. It's all in there, all the different aspects of criteria, which I can't really recount now.
Thank you, sir, for answer. So, sir, personally, I thank from my side from MNIT Jaipur, Dr. Amit Joshi, and also from NIT Patna, Bharat, sir, who is also
yes,
a coordinator. So, sir, please say a few words.
Okay.
Bharat,
Dr. David Riccio, we are really thankful for
Bharat,
your
video.
time.
Bharat,
hello?
Your video. We are not able to see you.
Yes, sir, just a moment. Sir, is it okay?
yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now it is visible.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. Dr. David Riccio, and we are really very thankful time and valuable information about the QS ranking, and the title which you have chosen, the globalizing excellence in ranking and the strategy, is really important in terms of the Indian aspects also. So what we have seen in the scenarios that we Indian rankings, we Indian universities are not among the top 500, like only 1 or 2 are there. So it's really important to understand that what is required to be in the first 100 or first 200. from our university side. So your talk is really enlightening us to the points, pick points that where we can stress out, where we can see to improve ourselves. And I really appreciate that you have mentioned that a lot about the Indian universities, like what we have to do. I see Bangalore, IITs, you have talked about in your talk. And in that, you have all Indian institution must, we have to work out to become the globalized. And you have already shown us the path that the strategy is really more important. And with this strategy, in which we have to come up, we have to talk about in terms of science, we have to talk about in terms of education, and we have to talk about the community. And more important is that we have to use, socialize our things, that whatever we are doing small.
Bharat sir, probably your voice is.
Bharat, your voice is gone.
You are not audible, sir. Bharat sir, you are not audible now.
Okay, so like what you have talked about science, education, and community, and whatever the small work that which the any of the Indian university is doing, that he has to put it on the social media, because this is the only medium where we can connect with each and every person around the world. So yes, you have really pointed out a lot of very important point, and in which you have also mentioned as the strategy mandate, that message how we have to go, we have to tell, we have to establish, we have to work for that, we have to become, and then drive, lead, and enabling. So this is the message which you have given to all the faculty participants who are here right now, and I hope they will keep this word and they will discuss with their higher authorities to that how we can improve our Indian universities ranking. So with these words, we are really thankful, Dr. David Riccio, for your time and and you have given us an opportunity to listen you. We are thankful to you, and thanks for coming with us. Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay. Well, so I just say thank you. It's been a great privilege, and I'm always happy to talk again and to participate again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we are very happy to have you here, and we hope that in the future also we'll receive your affection and support. Nice having you here, David. Thank you very much. We are
Thank you.
Thank you,
Yes.
sir. Thank you,
Thank you
sir.
very much. Bye-bye now.
Thank you, David.
Speak soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye. Amit?
Yes, sir.
Amit sir,
So
my voice is there?
sir. Yes, yes,
Yes.
you are audible, sir. Now, participants,
So-
we have a examination or quiz is being scheduled. So please log in at sharp 6:45 after 5 minutes. Okay. So I request all the participants to be there. Yes, Bharat sir.
Yes, no, I'm just asking, there is a one thing, like we request all the proctor coordinators to please just inform to their participants under their proctorship to just that the quiz is going to be start at 6:45. All of the participant will log in into Canvas and attempt the quiz, because based on the quiz we are going to give the certificate, because based on the performance in the quizzes we are providing the certificate. So the quiz, attempting the quiz is most important over here. So all the best to all the participants. Thank you so much.
Please log into Canvas and go to quiz where you can find out the quiz. Please.
Amit sir, do we
Yes,
have
sir.
to be online with this Cisco Webex? This here?
Probably, sir, I will be here because if at all any issue is there, then I will, sir, resolve it. No issue, sir. No issue, sir.
Okay. So just participant, there is a one more announcement, as Dr. Amit is saying that we are all online over here. If you face any problem in the in attempting the quiz or opening something, because then you can raise it over here. We will try to sort it out from our side. Thank you so much.
Okay, sir. Please,
Sir,
quiz it will be visible at 6:45. I will publish the quiz at 6:45. So please So still it is not being published. Few of you are asking question, but still it is not being published.